Welcome to Revenge with Precious, where we share real stories of betrayal, resilience, and the courage to stand up for yourself. These are tales of people who refused to stay silent, who drew boundaries when love turned toxic, and who chose their peace over family obligation. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, these stories are for you. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see your own life. Please, watch till the end. Let's get started. The conference room had that smell. You know the one. Leather chairs nobody sits in comfortably, air freshener trying to mask panic, and the faint metallic scent of a decision already made. I was halfway through my quarterly compliance report when the CEO walked in. No assistant. No warning. Just him, a folder under his arm, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tessa," he said, sitting across from me like we were about to discuss lunch plans. "We've been evaluating operational costs." My pen stopped moving. I'd heard that phrase before. It was the corporate equivalent of someone saying we need to talk. I glanced at the folder. My name was printed on the tab. Not a good sign. He opened it, and I saw my salary breakdown, benefit summary, and a highlighted section labeled redundancy assessment. "You've done solid work," he continued, voice smooth as rehearsed sympathy. "But in this climate, we need to streamline. Your role, while valuable, has become something we can redistribute." Redistribute. That was the word that made my stomach drop. Not eliminate. Redistribute. Like I was a budget line item they could reassign to someone's already overloaded desk. I didn't interrupt. I just watched him, waiting for the punch I knew was coming. He slid a separation agreement across the table. 2 weeks severance. Standard non-disparagement clause. A highlighted signature line at the bottom. "We're restructuring the compliance division," he said, tapping the paper with his knuckle. "Legal will absorb your responsibilities. It's more efficient this way." I stared at the document. My brain was moving faster than my mouth. Legal. They didn't know the first thing about federal healthcare certifications. They handled contracts, not regulatory submissions. Not the kind of submissions that required biometric authentication and cross-agency verification. Not the kind tied to my digital identity. "When does this take effect?" I asked, voice steady. "Immediately," he said. "We'll need you to transition your files by end of day." Immediately. That meant I had about 6 hours to hand over a decade of institutional knowledge, federal access credentials, and ongoing renewals that had deadlines tighter than his budget cuts. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't apologetic. He was already mentally spending the salary he'd just freed up. "I'll need to finalize the renewals before I go," I said quietly. He waved a hand. "Legal can handle it." I nodded. Slowly. "Sure. Legal can handle it." The office felt different after that meeting. Not quieter. Just heavier. Like the walls knew something nobody else did yet. I walked back to my desk, and 3 people pretended not to stare. News travels fast in open floor plans. Especially when the CEO walks you into a conference room and you come out holding a folder that screams termination. I sat down. Opened my laptop. The compliance dashboard was still logged in. Green checkmarks across the board. Every certification current. Every vendor authorized. Every federal submission time-stamped and approved. It was clean. Perfect. The kind of system that only looks easy because someone spent years making it foolproof. I pulled up the master list. 47 active certifications. 18 federal agencies. 6 international regulatory bodies. All of them cross-referenced. All of them requiring my personal authorization code to process renewals. My name was embedded in every compliance chain like DNA in a cell. Without me, the system didn't just slow down. It stopped. I opened a new folder on my desktop. Labeled it Final Audit Trail. Then I started copying. Every license. Every timestamp. Every confirmation receipt. Every email trail that proved I'd been doing this job alone for the last 3 years while they hired 2 marketing VPs and a chief innovation officer who didn't innovate anything except new ways to waste budget. By noon, I had everything backed up. Not to the company server. To a personal encrypted drive I kept in my bag for exactly this kind of scenario. Call it paranoia. Call it preparation. I called it knowing how corporations operate when efficiency consultants start whispering in executive ears. My phone buzzed. A text from Kyle in legal. Heard the news. That sucks. Want to grab lunch? I replied, rain check. Busy. He sent back a thumbs up. Kyle was a good guy. Smart. But he didn't know compliance. Nobody in legal did. They knew contracts. They knew liability. They knew how to draft NDAs that scared interns into silence. But they didn't know that our platform's medical data certification required quarterly submissions to 3 separate federal bodies, each with different formats, different authentication protocols, and different consequences for late filings. They didn't know that my digital signature was the only one registered with the Office of Health IT certification. They didn't know that when I left, that signature became invalid. And the system, designed to protect patient data, would automatically lock down. No override. No bypass. Just a hard stop until a new authorized officer was registered, verified, and cleared. That process took 6 weeks. Minimum. I glanced at the calendar on my wall. The next renewal deadline was in 11 days. At 2 p.m., HR called me down. I expected paperwork. I got a lecture. The HR director, a woman named Fiona who wore blazers like armor and smiled like she was paid by the tooth, gestured to a chair. Tessa, I know this is difficult, she began, voice dripping with false empathy. But we need to ensure a smooth transition. I nodded. She handed me a checklist. Offboarding tasks. 15 items. Return laptop. Delete personal files. Transfer active projects. Sign final acknowledgement. I scanned the list. Nothing about compliance credentials. Nothing about federal access. Nothing about the fact that my departure would trigger a regulatory chain reaction that would make their restructuring look like a campfire next to a forest blaze. This looks fine, I said, setting it on the desk. But I'll need to document the compliance handoff separately. Federal protocols require it. Fiona blinked. Can't you just email legal the files? I smiled. Polite. Professional. It's not that simple. There are verification steps. Authorization transfers. I'll draft the transition plan and send it over. She looked relieved. Great. Just have it done by 5. I stood. Absolutely. I walked out of that office knowing she had no idea what she'd just signed off on. None of them did. Back at my desk, I opened the compliance portal. Federal Healthcare Certification Dashboard. My login credentials were still active. For now. I navigated to the renewal queue. 3 submissions pending. All due within the next 2 weeks. I hovered the mouse over the submit button. 1 click. That's all it would take. 1 click, and the renewals would process. The certifications would stay active. The platform would keep running. The company would never know how close they came to disaster. I moved my hand away from the mouse. Not today. Not for a company that just told me I was redundant. I logged out. Then I opened a new document. Titled it Compliance Transition Plan. I wrote 1 sentence. All active certifications require authorized signatory verification per Federal Statute 42 CFR Part 412. Current signatory departure triggers mandatory recredentialing process. Estimated timeline, 6 to 8 weeks. I saved it. Attached it to an email. Sent it to legal, HR, and the CEO. Then I packed my bag. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just walked out the door like it was any other Tuesday. Except it wasn't. Because in 11 days, the clock would run out. And nobody knew but me. The first 3 days were quiet. I spent them at home, drinking coffee that didn't taste like office desperation, and updating my resume. My phone stayed silent. No panicked calls. No urgent emails. Just the soft hum of a life suddenly untethered from corporate chaos. On day 4, I got a message from Kyle. Hey, quick question. Where are the compliance renewal files? I replied, check the shared drive. Folder labeled Q2 certifications. He sent back, found it. But it's asking for an authorization code? I stared at the message. Typed, that's my personal credential. You'll need to request a new one through the federal portal. Him, how long does that take? Me, 6 weeks. Minimum. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, seriously? Me, seriously. He didn't respond after that. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. A new email sat in my inbox. Subject line, consulting opportunity. It was from a competitor. A smaller healthcare SaaS company that had been trying to poach me for 2 years. They'd heard I was available. They wanted to talk. I opened the message. Read it twice. Then I replied, I'm interested. Let's schedule a call. On day 6, my old CEO called. I let it ring. Twice. Then I answered. Tessa, he said, voice tight. We have a situation. I didn't speak. Just waited. Legal is saying we can't process compliance renewals without your credentials. Is that accurate? I took a sip of coffee. Yes. Silence. Then, can you just log in remotely and submit them? I laughed. Actually laughed. No. Federal law prohibits unauthorized access after employment termination. My credentials were automatically revoked when I signed the separation agreement. His breathing changed. Sharper. So what do we do? I leaned back in my chair. You request a new authorized signatory through the Office of Health IT Certification. It's a standard process. Takes about 6 weeks. 6 weeks. His voice cracked. We have deadlines in 10 days. I know, I said calmly. I sent a transition plan to legal and HR outlining exactly this scenario. It was in the email I sent on my last day. Silence. Long and heavy. We didn't see that. I smiled. Then I'd suggest checking your spam filters. I hung up before he could respond. Day 7. The vendor emails started. I wasn't copied on them directly, but Kyle forwarded me a chain. Panicked. Desperate. Subject, urgent, data exchange authorization expired. The message was from a hospital network. One of the company's biggest clients. We are unable to process patient data through your platform. System is showing certification error. Please advise immediately. Kyle's note at the bottom, Tessa, any idea what this means? I replied, it means the federal certification expired because no authorized signatory renewed it. The platform is locked until compliance is restored. Him, can we backdoor it? Me, no. It's regulator controlled. Not even admin access can override it. Him, this is bad. Me, yes. It is. I closed the laptop, opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass, and toasted to the word redundant. Day 8. The board got involved. I didn't hear this from anyone at the company. I heard it from a contact who worked in their investor relations department. She texted me, they're in full panic mode. CEO just got chewed out in an emergency board meeting. Apparently the compliance thing is bigger than anyone realized. I replied, how big? Her, vendor freeze. Client complaints. Potential audit. Stock dip. I set the phone down. Stared at the ceiling. This wasn't revenge. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't deleted files or hidden passwords. I'd just followed protocol. I'd documented everything. I'd sent the transition plan. I'd done exactly what a compliance officer is supposed to do. They were the ones who ignored it. They were the ones who thought certifications were just paperwork. They were the ones who believed efficiency meant cutting the person who kept the system running. I picked up my phone. Opened the email from the competitor. They'd sent a formal offer. Senior Compliance Director. 20% salary increase. Equity. Full benefits. I read it twice. Then I replied, I accept. Day 9. The media noticed. A small trade publication ran a headline, Healthcare SaaS firm faces vendor disruption amid compliance issues. The article didn't name me, but it quoted anonymous sources saying the company was scrambling after an unexpected personnel change. I screenshotted it, sent it to no one, just kept it. By evening, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Tessa Moore. A voice asked. Yes. This is Gina Fellows, General Counsel for your former employer. We'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement. I didn't speak. She continued. We're prepared to offer you a contractor rate. $50,000 for 2 weeks of work. All you'd need to do is help us expedite the certification renewal process. $50,000. For 2 weeks. To fix the problem they created by firing me. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, I'm not available. Her tone shifted. Ms. Moore, I don't think you understand the severity of this situation. We have clients threatening to leave. We have regulators asking questions. We need your help. I smiled. No. You need compliance. And compliance isn't a person. It's a system. You dismantled that system. Now you're living with the consequences. I hung up. Day 10. The audit notice arrived. I didn't see it personally, but Kyle sent me a screenshot. Official letterhead. Department of Health and Human Services. Subject, Mandatory Compliance Audit, Scheduled Site Visit. They had 72 hours to prepare. I knew what that meant. They'd need to produce every certification, every renewal record, every authorization log. And they'd need to explain why their platform was processing medical data without an active compliance officer. They couldn't. Because I was the only one who knew where those records were stored. The only one who knew which vendor agreements tied to which federal clauses. The only one who'd been doing this job while everyone else focused on growth metrics and investor presentations. I opened my laptop. Started drafting my onboarding plan for the new company. My competitor. The one that had just signed 3 new hospital networks. The same ones that were pulling out of contracts with my old employer. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe those hospitals did their research. Maybe they looked at who was running compliance at both companies. And maybe they chose the one with a compliance director who actually knew what she was doing. Day 11. Deadline day. The renewals that should have been submitted were now officially overdue. The system, as designed, entered automatic lockdown. No data processing. No vendor exchanges. No client access. The compliance dashboard turned red. Every certification flagged as expired. Every vendor agreement suspended. The platform that had been running smoothly for 5 years was now a digital graveyard. And there was no manual override. No emergency bypass. Just a hard stop that required federal reauthorization to lift. I got a text from someone I didn't recognize. Unknown number. The message was short. You did this on purpose. I replied, no. I did my job. They chose not to listen. The response came fast. People are going to lose their jobs because of you. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed, people already lost their jobs. Starting with me. The difference is, I was the only one who knew how to prevent this. I blocked the number. Poured another coffee. And started my first day at the new company. My new office had windows. Real ones. Not the fake motivational kind with stock photos of mountains. Actual glass overlooking the city. My new manager, a woman named Petra who wore sensible shoes and didn't talk in buzzwords, shook my hand. Welcome aboard, she said. We've been following the news. Sounds like your old company is having a rough week. I smiled. Compliance is tricky. She nodded. That's why we value it. You'll have full authority here. No budget cuts. No restructuring. Just keep us clean. I looked at the compliance dashboard on my new workstation. All green. Every certification current. Every vendor authorized. It was beautiful. I can do that, I said. Petra handed me a file. We've got 3 new hospital contracts starting next month. I'll need your sign-off before we onboard them. I opened the file. Scanned the agreements. Everything was in order. This looks good, I said. I'll have the compliance review done by Friday. She smiled. I knew we made the right call hiring you. That evening, I got an email from the CEO. My old one. Subject line, please. The message was short. Tessa, I made a mistake. I see that now. We need you. Please reconsider. We'll reinstate your position. Full salary. Benefits. Whatever you want. Just help us fix this. I read it 3 times. Then I replied, I appreciate the offer. But I've accepted a position elsewhere. You'll need to work with the federal office to resolve the certification issue. That process typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. I recommend starting immediately. Best of luck. I hit send, closed my laptop, and slept better than I had in years. 2 weeks later, the audit results were published. Internal memo. Leaked to the press. The findings were brutal. Multiple expired certifications. Unauthorized data processing. Failure to maintain compliance officer on staff. Regulatory penalties. Vendor suspensions. Client contract terminations. The CEO resigned. The board launched an internal investigation. And my name appeared in exactly one place, former compliance officer, fully documented transition plan submitted prior to departure. I was exonerated. They were exposed. Not because I'd sabotaged them, but because I'd followed every rule. I'd documented everything. I'd warned them, and they'd ignored it. 3 weeks after I started my new job, I got a LinkedIn message. From a recruiter. Not for me. For my replacement. They were desperate. Offering double my old salary. Signing bonus. Relocation assistance. The job description was almost comical, seeking experienced compliance officer with federal healthcare certification expertise. Must be able to restore lapsed certifications and rebuild regulatory relationships. Urgent hire. I screenshot it. Sent it to Petra. She laughed. They're going to have a hard time filling that. I nodded. Anyone qualified won't touch them. Not after what happened. She leaned back in her chair. Good thing we got you first. A month later, my old company made the news again. Settlement with regulators. 7-figure fine. 3-year probationary monitoring. Mandatory quarterly audits. The article mentioned me. Not by name. Just as the former compliance officer whose departure triggered the crisis. The comments section was ruthless. Some blamed the company. Some blamed me. Most just marveled at how badly they'd screwed up. One comment stuck with me. This is what happens when you treat compliance like an expense instead of an investment. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. 6 months later, I was sitting in a conference room. Not theirs. Mine. Presenting a compliance audit to our board. Every certification current. Every vendor authorized. Every federal requirement exceeded. The board chair smiled. Exceptional work, Tessa. This is exactly why we brought you on. I nodded. Compliance isn't a department. It's a foundation. You don't cut corners on foundations. He glanced at a report in his folder. I see your old company is still struggling to recover. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. He closed the folder. Their loss. Our gain. A year later, I got a call. From Fiona. The HR director who'd handed me that checklist. Her voice was different. Quieter. Tessa, I wanted to apologize. I didn't interrupt. She continued. We didn't understand. We thought compliance was just paperwork. We thought anyone could do it. We were wrong. I took a breath. Thank you for saying that. She hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm not there anymore either. They cleaned house after the audit. I felt a strange pang. Not sympathy. Just recognition. She'd been a cog too. What are you doing now? I asked. Freelance HR consulting. Ironically, I specialize in compliance training now. I smiled. That's good. People need to understand it. She paused. Did you ever think it would go this far? I looked out my office window. No. I just knew what would happen if they ignored the rules. And they did. We said goodbye. I never heard from her again. 2 years later, my new company went public. Stock opened strong. Investors loved our compliance record. 0 violations. 0 penalties. Every audit passed with commendations. At the IPO celebration, Petra raised a glass. To Tessa. The reason we're here today. Everyone cheered. I smiled, raised my glass, and thought about that conference room, that folder, that word. Redundant. Turns out, I wasn't redundant. I was irreplaceable. They just didn't know it until it was too late. 3 years later, I spoke at a compliance conference. The audience was full of people like me. People who kept systems running. People who got ignored until something broke. I told my story. Not as revenge. As a lesson. Compliance isn't glamorous, I said. It doesn't get headlines. It doesn't win awards. But it's the difference between a company that survives and one that collapses. The applause was loud. Genuine. Afterward, a young woman approached me. I'm a compliance officer, she said. My company just hired an efficiency consultant. I'm scared. I looked at her. Document everything. Back up your credentials. And make sure they understand what you do before they decide you're redundant. She nodded. What if they don't listen? I smiled. Then you'll know they're not worth staying for. 5 years later, I was asked to consult for a documentary about corporate compliance failures. They wanted to feature my story. I declined. Not because I was ashamed, but because the story wasn't about me. It was about the system. The rules that exist for a reason. The roles that seem invisible until they're gone. I sent the producer a message instead. If you want to understand compliance, don't focus on the people who failed. Focus on the ones who tried to warn them. I never heard back. But I didn't need to. The message had been delivered. 10 years later, I retired. Not because I had to. Because I'd done what I came to do. I'd built systems. I'd trained teams. I'd proven that compliance wasn't overhead. It was infrastructure. On my last day, Petra handed me a plaque. It read, Tessa Moore, Director of Compliance. The foundation we built on. I looked at it. Smiled. Thank you. She hugged me. Thank you. For everything. I walked out of that office. Not with a folder under my arm. Not with a severance agreement. Just with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd done my job. And I'd done it right. Years later, I got one final email. From my old CEO. Subject line, closure. The message was simple. Tessa, I never apologized properly. I should have. You were right. About everything. We've rebuilt since then. Different leadership. Different priorities. Compliance is now our most valued department. I wanted you to know that. I hope you're doing well. I read it. Thought for a long time. Then I replied, I appreciate that. I'm glad you learned. Compliance isn't a cost. It's a responsibility. I hope your new team understands that. Take care. I hit send. Closed my laptop. And walked outside. The air was clean. The sky was clear. And somewhere, in an office I'd never see again, someone was probably ignoring a compliance officer. Probably calling their role redundant. Probably about to learn the same lesson. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd already taught it once. And that, I realized, was enough. Thank you for watching this story. If moments like these resonate with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who couldn't see you, then you're not alone. We share stories like this every single day, real accounts of people who found their voice, set their boundaries, and walked into the life they deserved. Subscribe so you never miss the next upload, and share your own story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. I love you all.